have finally gotten to the fundamental theorem of calculus part 2, and this theorem is called the evaluation theorem. So the first theorem, part 1, was called construction, where we constructed an antiderivative for a continuous function or an interval. And this theorem is an evaluation theorem. It allows us to evaluate definite integrals for continuous functions on closed intervals if we know an antiderivative of that function. So here is the statement of this theorem. Let's suppose that lowercase f is a continuous function on a closed interval from a to b, and capital letter F is any antiderivative of little f on that interval. Then the theorem says that the value of the definite integral of this function is equal to the antiderivative, an antiderivative evaluated at the upper limit of integration minus an antiderivative evaluated at the lower limit of integration. So let's think about this as an application. Imagine that the function that we're integrating is a velocity function over a time interval from a to b. And capital F of x is then an antiderivative of velocity, would represent a position function. So this is telling us that the integral of this rate of change function over time, right? So here we have velocity times an infinitesimal increment of time, will be equal to the net change of the position function over that interval. So this means that we are able to find the net change in position of a particle traveling at a specific velocity, maybe a non-constant velocity that's a continuous function, by finding the area underneath that, between the velocity function and the x-axis. That will give us the net change in the position of the function. Okay, so now let's prove this theorem, and let's think about what we have, right? We know that f is an antiderivative. So this is given to us. It's part of the premise of the theorem. So f is an antiderivative of lowercase f, function f, on this interval. Let's suppose that we have another antiderivative, and let's call that one g of x. And remember that one function has an infinite number of antiderivatives, and that they differ by a constant. So we have another antiderivative of f, little g of x, and this one looks like the area accumulation function. Remember that we said that in fundamental theorem part 1, the area accumulation function is an antiderivative of f of t, because when we take its derivative, we get the original function evaluated at x. So let's suppose that g is another antiderivative, and it's the accumulation function. So we know that work that we've done in the past has told us that the difference between, or how antiderivatives of the same function are related to each other. Antiderivatives of the same function are just shifts of one another along the y-axis, vertical shifts. So we know that if f of x is an antiderivative and so is g of x, we know that f of x is g of x plus some constant c. In other words, antiderivatives of the same function differ by a constant. Okay, so now that we have this established, I'm going to focus on the right side of our theorem conclusion, the antiderivative evaluated at b minus the antiderivative evaluated at a, and we're going to work from that and try to obtain from the right side the left side of the theorem. Oops, sorry, that should be capital F of b minus capital F of a. Okay, so let's start from here. Well, we know that capital F is related to capital G. They're both antiderivatives of the same function, they differ by a constant. So I'm going to rewrite f of b minus f of a using g. So this should be the same as g of b plus c, since f of b should be g of b plus c, minus f of a, which will be g of a plus c. I'm just using this equation for f, how f and g are related to each other. So here we can see that that arbitrary constant of integration will cancel out. And we get g of b minus g of a. Great. But we know what g looks like because that is our area accumulation function. So let's write that out. Since g of x is the integral from a to x of f of t dt, g of b will be the integral from a to b of f of t dt. And g of a will be the integral from a to a, since x is a in this case, of f of t dt. Oops, I keep doing that. Of f of t dt. Now, we also know that when we integrate from a to a, the value of this integral is 0 because we have no width for our rectangles in the Riemann sum. And so this then just gives us the integral from a to b of f of t dt, and we have completed our proof because our equation starts from telling us that the antiderivative evaluated at b minus antiderivative evaluated at a is equal to the integral from a to b of f of t dt. And we have proven fundamental theorem part 2. Now, let's go back. So I want to show you something about fundamental theorem part 1. Let's suppose that I want to find, so let's return to part 1, and we'll use now part 2 to better understand part 1. So let's suppose with part 1 that I want to find the derivative for the following function. Integral, let's say, from 3 to x of cosine of t dt. Okay, part 1 of the fundamental theorem of calculus, right, tells us that this derivative with respect to x, which is the upper limit of integration, should give us cosine of x. In other words, the derivative of the integral are undoing each other, and we get cosine x. Well, let's use, now that we've proven part 2, we can use it. So let's use part 2 and see if we can understand what part 1 means, or at least have another idea of part 1. All right, so if I want to find the derivative of this function, now we have a way of actually evaluating the integral from 3 to x of cosine t dt. Part 2 tells us that we can find an antiderivative of the integrand, and so that antiderivative is going to be sine of t, since the derivative of sine is cosine. And then we're going to integrate that from 3 to x. So this just, I use this symbol, a line from 3 to x, to tell me that I'm going to need to evaluate sine of t from 3 to x. And so this is going to be sine evaluated at the upper limit, so sine evaluated at x, this is capital F of b, minus capital F of a, so minus sine evaluated at 3. Okay, fine. That's the result of integrating this, but now I actually want to find the derivative of this function. So now if we differentiate with respect to x, sine x minus sine of 3, well, the derivative of sine of x is cosine x, and the derivative of sine of 3 is a constant, so that's 0. And then we get the result, which is cosine x, which is what the first part of the fundamental theorem was telling us, right? That's what we obtained here. And now we did this by using the second part of the fundamental theorem of calculus. Okay, so that wraps up the theory portion of section 5.4, and we're going to follow this with some examples using fundamental theorem of calculus part 2.